Hi, my name is Abby Buboltz, and I'm the registered dietitian here at Holy Family. And today I'm going to be talking about nutrition related to exercise. So, first of all, let's talk about the basics a little bit. When it comes to sports nutrition or exercise nutrition, we still have to keep in mind the general function of the foods that we're eating. So, first of all, carbohydrates are our main fuel source. So carbohydrates are what our muscles function on, essentially. And with carbohydrates, the main sources of carbohydrates are things like bread, pasta, rice, cereal. But also, food sources of carbohydrates include fruit and even things like milk and yogurt. So there are a lot of different foods we can obtain our carbohydrates from, no matter what specific foods we like or may be trying to avoid or have more of. When it comes to protein, we hear about protein a lot when it comes to exercise, and part of the reason for that is protein is necessary for building and repairing our muscles. So when we exercise and those muscles are broken down, as they should be a little bit, protein is necessary for rebuilding and repairing, and it can help us add that muscle that maybe we might be trying to add, or it can also help us recover from the exercise that we did. So food sources of protein include not only meat, but also things like nuts and seeds, things like legumes and eggs, peanut butter. Also things like dairy products have protein as well. So again, a lot of different sources of protein. When it comes to fat for exercise is basically an additional source of calories and an additional source of fuel. We hear about fat sometimes as being something maybe we should avoid, but it really comes down to what types of fat are we doing more of. So doing things like oils, nuts, seeds, things like olives, avocados are what we kind of consider the healthy fats. So we want to get a majority of our fats from those. But some of our fats might come from things like butter occasionally, and our dairy products may have some fat as well. And it's more so having a combination of these things. But certainly, to have a balanced diet, we do need to have fat. So, one of the most common questions that I get is, what should I eat before I do a workout or before I exercise? The main thing to think about here is that carbohydrates are that fuel source. So in order to have the energy that we need to make sure that we are including carbohydrates in this pre-workout, whether it's meal or snack. That depends on what time of day you may be exercising. So what I usually recommend is counting back the hours from when you exercise. So we'll just use the example of, let's say you exercise at 5 p.m. So we'd count back 1 to 2 hours, and that would be where we want to just have a small snack. So this would maybe be a mid-afternoon snack, maybe around 3 p.m. And that would be something that we really want to be mostly carbohydrate. So that could be things like some sort of cracker, maybe even some sort of fruit, sometimes here dry cereal. Bland is usually better when we talk about that food that we're eating right before exercise, because anything that has a lot of fat, a lot of fiber, or a lot of protein will digest much more slowly and may kind of sit in our stomach where we don't really feel good, or you kind of feel that full feeling still while you're exercising, even if it's been a couple hours. So that snack we really want to be mostly carbohydrates. When we count back 3 to 4 hours before exercise, that should be a regular meal. So if we count back from a 5 p.m. workout, 4 hours would be about 1 or maybe noon. So that would be your lunchtime meal. So usually when you have a meal 3 to 4 hours before you exercise, oftentimes that's enough time for that meal to fully digest. You want that meal to have a combination of carbohydrates, protein, and you do want to limit fiber and dairy a little bit here, depending on what you tolerate. Some people notice that if they have too much fiber, so too much raw fruits or veggies, or dairy, that it doesn't sit as well with them. Certainly you can have these things, and some people tolerate them fine. But many people find that if they have too much of these things, especially before a more intense exercise, that they may not digest quite as well. So this is variable for each person. Some people may need to eat a meal 3 hours before exercise, and then that's about all that they can handle. So it is individual how much time you need before you can exercise based on when you ate. But just keep in mind that fiber and fat, especially, will digest a little bit more slowly. These are all to be taken into consideration with moderate to vigorous exercise. If it's light exercise, oftentimes you can get away with protein and fiber and fat and maybe larger quantities, just because that heart rate's not getting up quite as much. So the intensity of the exercise also varies with how much you can tolerate and how much food you can tolerate. If you do have a sensitive stomach, and let's say you get up not much before a morning exercise, and maybe you don't have time to eat a full meal, or you don't have time to digest too much food, this is sometimes where liquid calories can be helpful. And again, this is kind of an individual situation, but this would be a case where maybe something like a sports drink or just a small glass of juice, something really, really small but liquid. Carbohydrates or liquid calories sometimes will digest a little bit faster and won't sit in your stomach quite so much. So if you do have a little bit less time, and you know you're not able to have a full meal or a full snack, a little bit of liquid sometimes can be an option as well. So keep that in mind too. If you aren't able to get a full meal and a snack in before exercise, that's okay. It's helpful just to have something before you exercise. Again, that's your fuel source. So switching gears a little bit here, what should I eat after I work out? So again, this is speaking more to moderate or vigorous exercise. If you are exercising lightly, you wouldn't necessarily have to have a snack. Of course, we would recommend that you're eating consistent meals throughout the day, regardless of exercise. But this is more so if you have a more moderate to vigorous intensity exercise. So the general rule is to eat a snack within 30 to 45 minutes of exercise, or that meal's coming within 30 to 45 minutes of exercise. But for most of us, a snack is going to be a little bit more practical. So within 30 to 45 minutes is what we know is kind of the optimal time to have a snack, but certainly if you miss that cutoff and you eat something an hour after, it still benefits you. So just know that although that is optimal, it's still beneficial even if you do get a snack a little bit after that time frame. So within 30 to 45 minutes, this is where we want to have something that has not only carbohydrates, but we also want to have protein here. Remember, protein is what builds and repairs those muscles. Carbohydrates replenish those glycogen stores in your muscles. And so we want to have a combination of both. You may have heard about chocolate milk as being a good recovery drink. And the reason for that is an 8-ounce glass of chocolate milk has a 4-to-1 ratio of carbohydrates to protein. This 4-to-1 ratio has been found to be beneficial. However, most of us, it's more so of getting in the habit of having a combination of carbohydrates and protein. So although a glass of chocolate milk is an option, there's certainly many other options to also get those carbohydrates and protein. So I like to think of things here that maybe don't need a whole lot of refrigeration. So even just a peanut butter sandwich or half a peanut butter sandwich, this would be a time to have, a trail mix of some sort. Maybe it's a homemade one where you can choose what you like to put in there. Or maybe it's just a simple piece of fruit and a string cheese. And then, of course, milk or yogurt are also options here as kind of that quick snack that has both carbohydrates and protein. The goal then would be that you are having a meal within a few hours after exercising. So whether this is breakfast or lunch, for some, or supper for others of us. Having that well-balanced meal also ensures then that you are getting the rest of those nutrients that you need. So again, that 2-hour time frame, this is not a hard and fast rule. It's just keeping in mind that after you exercise, you do want to get a meal in. Sometimes what will happen is if we wait too long after exercising to eat, we notice that we are much, much more hungry later on in the day or later on in the evening. Sometimes it kind of catches up with you after a while. So being proactive by having that snack and then having a meal is really important because it can help avoid those big hunger levels that happen later and then causes us to overeat. So having that snack can be helpful. If you are eating your meal within 30 to 45 minutes, that's okay. That counts as that snack and meal together then. So don't worry about trying to fit in both if you are eating a meal within 30 to 45 minutes after exercise. So the other piece of exercise nutrition is the hydration component. So we know that it is really important to stay hydrated for our general health, but then also when it comes to exercise. When we exercise, we naturally dehydrate somewhat just because of our body processing our fluid levels and our body handling that sweat or getting rid of evaporating that sweat. So we do need hydration, even more so if we are exercising, and specifically if you are someone that you do sweat a lot or you know that you sweat a lot, this would be also a really important key. Staying hydrated helps make sure that we are recovering from the activity that we did, but then also it helps us actually get more out of our next workout if we're optimally hydrated. And on top of that, it helps us feel better too. You run less of a risk of getting injured and just in general feel better if you are hydrated. So when we're thirsty, that's a signal that we're already a little bit dehydrated. It's a great way for our body to say, hey, you need to drink. But when it comes to optimal hydration for exercise, we don't want to get to that point where we're constantly thirsty because that means we're behind the 8 ball a little bit. So although thirst can be a signal, actually urine is a good indicator of hydration. So we want it to be more lemonade colored versus apple juice colored. It doesn't need to be clear, but it does need to be on the lighter side to indicate that you are hydrated well. So this can be a great way to know what your hydration status is. So in order to stay well hydrated, the first recommendation would be that you are drinking about 16 ounces 2 hours before activity. So if you think about during that meal or snack time before you exercise, want to make sure that we're getting at least 16 ounces in at that time. And then about 15 minutes before activity, you'd want to get a glass or maybe 2 of water as well, kind of topping off the tank a little bit from that standpoint. The general rule of thumb after activity is for every pound you lose in sweat, replenish with 16 ounces of water. So I like to just think about that as 1 bottle of water for every pound you lose in sweat. So one of the things that you can do is weigh yourself before and after exercise to determine how much you lose. Everyone's a little bit different with what they lose. If you are exercising outside, the weather conditions may affect how much you're losing as well. And depending on the day and the type of activity you're doing, it may vary. But for those of you that do kind of the same amount of exercise and the same time of exercise most days, you should be able to get kind of a good idea of how much you lose. Or let's say you do have a day where you noticed you sweat a lot more and maybe it was a warmer day. That would be a day to weigh yourself and find out, okay, how much did I lose? Do I need to replenish with a little bit more water than I maybe normally do? So one of the other keys here is just making sure that you're kind of keeping a steady level of hydration. So it's not that you necessarily have to fill up on a lot of water quickly before you exercise. It's really maintaining that consistent hydration over the course of days and weeks so that you don't have to necessarily work so hard to replenish, and that you're kind of maintaining that level of hydration. Of course, with hydration, our main form of hydration would be water, and that would be the recommendation. But we'll talk about a few other ways to hydrate in a few minutes here. So when it comes to hydration, one of the keys is having water or fluids along with you during the day. So making it a standard part of your day that you have a fluid with you. If you don't have it with you, then you're not able to hydrate. Sometimes if you aren't in the habit of having water with you, even if you don't drink it, I just suggest start bringing it along with you so you're in the habit of always grabbing some water, so that you have that ability to hydrate once you get used to the habit of having it with. Warning signs of dehydration include unusual fatigue, lightheadedness, headache, dark urine, and dry mouth. Of course, these can be symptoms for other things too. So as always, if you're feeling funny in any way, please talk to your provider. But when it comes to dehydration, we want to avoid that as much as possible, just from a general health standpoint, as dehydration can be dangerous. When it comes to exercise, we know that hydration is helpful for us to get the most out of our exercise. You certainly don't need to overdrink. Like I said, you want to just keep a steady state of dehydration or of hydration. During exercise, usually we want to have about 4 to 6 ounces of fluid every 20 minutes or so. So one medium mouthful of water is 1 ounce. So basically you just want to have a few sips of water every 20 minutes or so, especially if that exercise is lasting, over 30 minutes, over 60 minutes, where you are exercising for extended amounts of time. Pouring water over your head may feel good, but it doesn't necessarily help lower your body temperature. So just keep in mind that drinking that fluid really is the most helpful way to stay hydrated. And then plan out your hydration schedule. So sometimes it's simply just planning it out for yourself and planning out how much you need and how much you plan to drink on a given day. If you're truly having challenges with this, sometimes it helps to just write it out for yourself so that you do have a plan. So sports drinks, sometimes we hear that sports drinks aren't a great option, and there is definitely a time and place for sports drinks. So for vigorous exercise that's lasting longer than an hour, especially if it's hot and humid, where you may be losing significant amounts of fluid, this is actually a place where sports drinks can come in handy, because when you're out there for a long time, sometimes you actually do need more carbohydrates and more electrolytes. So there are times where sports drinks, and they're formulated with the right percentage of carbohydrate for optimal digestion. So that's where if you had juice as a replacement during exercise lasting than 60 minutes, some people end up with very not uncomfortable or very uncomfortable feelings, digestive issues. And so because the carbohydrate content is not the optimal amount for hydration. So that's where sports drinks they're actually formulated to be able to be digested when you are exercising. Sports drinks do have some electrolytes, and that definitely can be helpful for certain individuals, especially salty sweaters. However, a lot of times they don't have quite as much as they're marketed to make us believe. So for people that really do have, sweat a lot or lose a lot of salt in their sweat, which you would notice by that salty feeling on your skin. The salt actually shows up on your skin or on your clothes. And so if you are a salty sweater, you may actually need additional salt in an actual salt tablet or in something, eating salty food before exercise, things like that. There are specific instances where people that need more electrolytes actually need more than what's in kind of our general sports drinks. That would be something to definitely ask your provider, or a dietitian would be able to help you with that. So please keep in mind that they don't necessarily cover all the bases with electrolytes, but they can be helpful. They also, like I mentioned, if you have a sensitive stomach, you're not able to eat much, or you really can't eat much for hours before exercise, then sports drinks, again, they're formulated to digest a little bit better, are a little bit easier sometimes to handle. And then these can be an option post-workout for hydration or rehydration as well. Again, especially when it's hot and humid and you are exercising longer than an hour. This is trial and error, so with sports drinks, some brands will be different than others, and some people will tolerate different brands than others. So keep that in mind and know that it does sometimes take a little trial and error for each person. It's on an individual basis. What we don't recommend sports drinks for is just, generally sitting around to drink, because it is extra calories and extra carbohydrates and sugar then. But sports specific, it actually can be a helpful tool. When it comes to sport bars, so things like protein bars, granola bars, how do those play into nutrition for exercise? So there are so many different ones out there that it really comes down to reading those labels and being aware of what is in the specific bar that you're looking at, and maybe wanting to try. So granola bars and protein bars can be a tool because they don't require refrigeration, and so you can bring them along with you, and you don't have to really worry about food safety. So protein bars, they do have quite a bit of protein. Oftentimes they're low carbohydrate, and because of that, to give them flavor, they may actually have either sweeteners or sugar alcohols. And sugar alcohols can sometimes have a laxative effect. So I always caution with protein bars. Sometimes they won't always sit well, especially before a workout. Sometimes they can be beneficial after a workout. And remember, again, if they're low carbohydrate, they won't give you much energy before a workout. Afterwards, you would get that protein, maybe a little bit of carbohydrate, so they could be a tool for after a workout. Regular granola bars, for some people, these can be a pre-workout snack if they need something quick. But if they're high in fiber, they may not digest as fast. Sometimes they'll kind of sit in that stomach, and although they may give you some energy, they may not digest quite as well as we'd like. So granola bars sometimes can be an option, but this would be something that I would say, trial it. And if you're going to trial it in small amounts first, and give yourself plenty of time to digest. When it comes to granola bars, sometimes there are recipes for making your own, and sometimes this works the best because then you know what's in it, and you kind of have control over the amounts of things based on the foods that you like and the foods that you can tolerate too. So when it comes to supplements, there's all sorts of supplements out there geared towards exercise, but I would caution, always talk to your doctor to make sure that there aren't any interactions with medication. Supplements also are not regulated like food, so it's really important that you know that you're getting a quality one. So I would recommend that you're looking for a label that shows that it was third-party tested, because if they say that they have something in it, sometimes it can be different amounts, or it may not be worth your money because it just may not be an effective tool. Many supplements, really, you can get what's in them through food, and oftentimes the food is absorbed and digested much more easily than some of the supplements out there. And my question too is, if you're considering taking a supplement, first of all, ask yourself if your nutrition is how it should be, you're hydrating how you should be, you're sleeping well, and you're doing the training that you need to. If you can answer all of those questions that you are, and you still think a supplement might be helpful, then that would maybe be a case. But I would say get all those other things in line that you have control of first, before utilizing a supplement. And of course, too, if you do have a question about a specific sports nutrition type supplement that you are asking a health professional as well. They might be able to take a look at a label and give you a little more insight as to whether it's a good option or whether it maybe isn't the greatest option, or there maybe is an alternative as well.